Hello, welcome to our show, where you will hear about everyday miracles happening in people's lives. God is real and sends His angels to help us, especially when we pray to them. Today I have one story, so let's begin. I wanted to share the story because most of us never fully realize how tangible the assistance of the angelic hosts are, or how important it is that we make the call daily for protection. Sometimes we don't think to make the calls until we're in an emergency situation. Such a situation occurred after our church's university spring quarter. I was taking the Greyhound bus home after 3 months of the most glorious spiritual experience of my life. A friend and staff member had warned me to sit close to the bus driver, but as I boarded the bus, his advice was impossible to follow because of the crowded conditions. I had to take a seat in the back. I did my traveling protection calls and decrees to Archangel Michael as always, and our journey began. There was a precious young man from Austria sitting next to me. Behind me was a young man from Chicago on his way home, whom I will call CW, and across from me was a young ex-military man. At one of the stops before Chicago, several passengers boarded, filling the bus to more than capacity and leaving a few standing in the aisles. It was at this stop that an intoxicated man, possibly on drugs, came aboard. He was acting crazy, and his language was so profane that it was difficult to sit near him. He took a seat behind me next to CW. I silently prayed to Archangel Michael that we would not have to listen to obscenity from this man, especially since there were children aboard. Thanks to the grace of God, he finally fell asleep. But the quiet didn't last long because the bus driver had to make an announcement. When the man woke up, it was like tuning into the same old station. His language was as bad as before. He told CW that he was going to buy more liquor at the next stop so they could party. He said he had a great deal of money on him and started to reach into his pocket, but the money was missing, and he became enraged. He pulled out a loaded revolver, yelling profanities and threatening to shoot if his money wasn't returned. CW was in the greatest danger since the man thought CW was a thief. I immediately started calling to Archangel Michael and the other Ascended Masters and Saints in the name of Jesus Christ to protect CW, myself, and all aboard the bus, and to bind the demons of evil that were working through this man. I decreed as loud as the situation would permit. As the man became angrier, the tension built. His gun was cocked, and he was demanding his money, which he said was about $12,000. I really didn't believe that CW had taken his money, so I also called to the angels of vision to help this man find his missing money. Within a few seconds, which seemed like an eternity, 3 miracles happened. First, he didn't shoot his gun. Second, he found his money in another pocket. And 3, his demons were bound, and to everyone's surprise, he started apologizing to everyone. Almost instantly, he had become completely sober and sane. By the time the bus driver found out what was going on, stopped the bus and reached the back, the man had put his gun away and was leaving the bus peacefully, still apologizing. I truly believe that without Archangel Michael and the ascended friends I called to on that day, CW and many innocent people would have been hurt or even killed, including myself. If the bus driver had approached the man sooner while he was still in a state of rage and anger, the situation may have gotten totally out of hand. By the grace of God, miracles happened, and we saw the real power of God through Archangel Michael. CW told all around him that I had been praying for him. He thanked God and me for being on the bus. I was able to witness to at least 4 people about the importance of calling to Archangel Michael as we continued our travels. CW told me that he would always remember this miracle. It changed his life as well as saved his life, and he has found a new friend in Archangel Michael. The young ex-military man continued on with me after Chicago. He told me he knew he had witnessed a miracle because he has seen a lot in the military and never witnessed anyone change so fast. He was going through a great deal of turmoil in his personal life, and the decrees and teachings about the Ascended Masters I shared with him seemed to give him comfort. I give praise and thanksgiving daily for Archangel Michael and the hosts of the Lord. The aid, help, and protection that we get daily when we make the calls is unlimited.
Out there across America. Listen, America, you know, you're my favorite country. I mean it. I love America. No one loves America more than I do. I'm in love with it. I really love it. To all the people out there across America, regardless of race, color, creed, or national origin, I'm your guy, and you're my people, and this is your show. Am I right, Nancy? And Richard and Marty and all the gang, we have a fantastic show for you tonight, and you'll have a chance to phone in because, get ready for this now, my guest tonight is Elizabeth Clare Prophet. She is the leader of the Church Universal and Triumphant, based here in Southern California. The 150,000 followers of her religion refer to Mrs. Prophet as, quote, the mother of the universe. I want you to take a look now at the church's peaceful setting, a retreat called Camelot, and the Guru Ma in action. And you will see it now in the privacy of your own home.
Send compassion from above to raise them all today. In the fullness of thy power, shed thy glorious beams upon the earth and all thereon where light and shadow seems. In the fullness of thy power, shed thy glorious beams upon the earth and all thereon where light and shadow seems. Let the light of God blaze forth to cut men free from pain. Raise them up and clothe them, God, with thy mighty eye and name.
All right, here is Elizabeth Clare Prophet. You want to make a clarification. They don't call you the mother of the universe? No. What do they call you?
Just mother.
Now, you believe you're the reincarnation of Jesus, of Marie Antoinette?
No, I don't. No. Jesus is a master whom we adore and love as our Savior. And we believe in the law of reincarnation and karma, and that we have all lived before, and that today we are the sum of what we have been, and that we have to go for it and make the best of what we got going for us, and look at our past and correct our weaknesses.
All right, I want to understand this. Now, I understand from there have been many stories about you. I think people across the country may know about you. People in Southern California do, because there was a number of stories in the Herald Examiner. That as a child, you were in a sandbox in Red Bank, New Jersey. Am I right? Mm-hmm. And you began to have certain fantasies. Please tell us about them as they might connect to our story today.
Well, as I was playing in the sand, I suddenly felt that I was on the Nile River playing in the sand. It was like an exchange of circumstance. And I was very small, and I asked my mother what was happening, and she said, you have remembered a past life. And that was the beginning of my quest for an understanding of who I was and where have I been.
All right. At that time, did you take a trip in your mind to the feet of Jesus?
No, this was not pertaining to Jesus. It was simply a past life in Egypt.
All right. And who was that past life in Egypt when you were 3 in the sandbox?
I never knew who it was. I just had the sense of having been there just as I was where I was today. And it was a very strange feeling.
All right. But you believe you're reincarnated. In other words, you've had a number of prior lives. Mm-hmm. And who have been in your prior lives?
Well, the one that I like to speak about is the one closest to my heart, which is with Jesus as Martha, where I learned the truths, the inner truths of his mission, and where I feel that I had my calling to be here today and to deliver again the real inner teachings of Jesus.
All right, let's talk about your church now. As I understand it, it's a combination of Christianity and Buddhism, and what else?
We draw from the teachings of the great leaders and sages of all times of ages, whether Gautama Buddha or Mohandas Gandhi, Jesus, Paul, John the Beloved, because we feel they were all revolutionaries of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. We're entering a new age. We need a revolution in consciousness, and we need to find the point of Christ within each one of us.
All right. Are you the final authority on all spiritual, political, and theological matters in your church?
No.
Who is?
God is.
All right. We heard that you believe at some point, in other words, as I understand this religion, that if your karma is good, you will ascend ultimately to heaven. Do you believe you're going to go to heaven physically and mentally?
I think people of all faiths have a goal of union with God. Christians talk about going to heaven and the resurrection. We desire that union with God. Karma is the net gain or loss of all of our actions of the present and previous lives.
But do you believe you're going to go to heaven physically?
I don't think I have any guarantee of going to heaven, and I don't think anybody goes to heaven physically.
All right.
I think we go spiritually in our souls when our time is through, if that's where we're going.
All right. Is it a fact that you have 150,000 followers?
We never released our membership rolls.
All right. In the bit of tape that we showed, was that called decreeing? What
Yes,
was
it
that
was.
chant? And what is the purpose of decreeing?
Decreeing is the affirmation of the Word of God and His name, I am, that I am given to Moses. It is prayer as Christians give it in unison, as Buddhists chant, as the various sects give the Hail Mary or the Lord's Prayer. It is the using of the power of the spoken word which only man has to create. God created by saying, let there be light, and there was light. And so we believe that in the qualification of the light of God with us, that we can elevate our consciousness and call forth the violet flame, call forth the fire of the Holy Spirit promised to us, and achieve constructive change in our world and in our lives.
What kind of change do you want to achieve?
I would like to see myself balance karma, become a constructive person, able to help people. I would like to be able to give you positive light and energy, help people in their lives. I'd like to send the violet flame to avert war, to bring about peace and freedom, and to alleviate the distresses of the planet.
All right, well, you have a bold agenda, do you not?
Well, it's just praying for world peace, as every religion does.
All right. Tell us now about the financial doings of the church. They say, for example, that CAMELOT, which was the old King Gillette facility out in Calabasas, which is in Southern California, is a $5 million retreat of 260 acres. Is that basically true?
Well, basically, that's the value of the property.
All right. How did you get this?
Our members decided that they wanted it. They raised the funds, and we acquired it about 8 years ago.
But you were the guiding light, am I right? In other words, you have been kind of the spiritual resource of this religion.
Well, I think that all of our people provide the spiritual resource for this church.
So in other words, people give donations?
Yes, they do.
How much money do they give?
They give whatever their heart desires to give.
All right. Have some people, for example, given $100,000 or something like that?
We do not give the information about our finances. I mean, people can give what they want to give. I don't even know if someone has given $100,000.
All right. How many members do you have in Malibu?
We don't give our membership figures.
Or what can you tell us? In other words, all right, who are your followers, Mrs. Prophet?
There are people from all walks of life. Little people, important people, not important people, average cross-section of Americans and people from many nations.
All right. Why all of the furor? For example, there's a lot of furor about the money. There have been many charges, as you know, that, for example, you took a mental patient and you made him sign away all of his belongings. That was one story, and you're being sued for it. How did these stories get going?
How do they get going? How can I say how they get going?
In other words, are you being sued now?
Yes, I am being sued, and of course that is not a subject I can discuss,
Right.
as we mentioned before, but it is not true that I had a mental patient sign away all of his funds.
All right. How many times have you been married? Can I ask you that question?
I've been married 4 times.
All right. Isn't it true that your real name is not Prophet? What was your maiden name?
My maiden name is Wolf.
Wolf. And you married a man named Mr. Prophet, right? And he was also going to go to heaven, and that he died. Is that true?
Many people believe that their loved ones are in heaven. This is a basic Christian faith. I believe that my loved one, Mark, is in heaven.
All right. Tell you what, let's take many, many questions. Maybe the people will have some questions for you. I know that you will. You'll be here for an hour along with many of your disciples. And as you can imagine, some people out there are concerned that this is a cult. We have an expert in Chicago who has written a book about this, who apparently has done some work on your church. He will provide some expertise. This is Stanley Siegel. You're on the air. America Talks Back with Mrs. Prophet, who is the mother of the flame. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Your question, please.
My name is Rodney. I'm from North Minneapolis.
Yes, Rodney.
I'd like to know if there's such a thing as reincarnation.
All right. Do you think there's such a thing as reincarnation?
Yes, I do. I believe that we have a continuum, that our souls move on, that we have lived before, and that what we are today is the sum of what we have done in the past.
All right. Thank you, Rodney. You're on the air, please. What is your question for Mrs. Prophet? Go ahead.
Hi, this is Steve. I'm calling from La Jolla, California.
Yes, Steve.
There is, it seems like there's a supermarket of evangelists, for lack of a better word, out there to shop in. We have Elizabeth Prophet, Oral Roberts, Terry Cole Whitaker, Peter Popoff, Rex Humbard, Robert Schuller, and I could go on and on and on, as you know. If the stakes are heaven or hell, or salvation, redemption, or damnation, if the stakes are that high, how do we know which one of you is right?
All right. Good question, Steve. How would you answer that, Mrs. Prophet?
I would say that God has given to each of us the faculty of discrimination as the flame, the divine spark in our hearts, and that we have the universal Christ with us. And the gift of free will gives us the option of testing and trying the spirits. We have a free country. We may go to various sources and decide which is right for us.
Tell us again who you think you are in the universe.
I think I am a person like every other person who is trying to find my way back to God. I think that God has given to me some answers, and that these are viable for some people. Mm-hmm. And I'm very joyous in sharing the message of Jesus and Saint Germain and Archangel Michael.
Who is Saint Germain? Who was that?
Saint Germain was embodied as the prophet Samuel and as Saint Joseph, the husband of Mary and protector of Jesus. And he is the sponsor of America. We refer to him as Uncle Sam. He comes with a great message of freedom for the Aquarian age. And I love him very deeply and feel a very close tie to this saint. And I feel his message is very timely for America.
All right. Mrs. Elizabeth Clare Prophet will be here along with two disciples and your questions and an expert on this kind of behavior as America talks about. This should be an incredible show. And we'll prepare after this time out with more questions. All right, you'll have a chance to take calls. To briefly recapitulate, our guest is Elizabeth Clare Prophet. She is the leader, the mother of the Church Universal and Triumphant in Los Angeles. And apparently your organization has a publishing house, a gold mine, several mansions, and 30,000 acres of mountain ranch land in Montana.
Not quite correct. We don't have a gold mine.
All right.
We don't have several mansions. And we do have a 30,000-acre ranch in Montana.
All right. Who owns the church in Southern California? Who owns that mansion? Who owns the facility there?
Church Universal and Triumphant owns it.
All right. Do you have any part? I mean, do you have a proprietary interest in it?
None whatsoever. I have a very small salary, and I do not own anything in the church.
All right. You're on the air. What is your question for Mrs. Prophet? Go ahead, please.
I have a friend who belongs to this group, and the materials that he sent out to me indicated that one who belongs to it should be secluded, not talk to anybody who's not a member of the group. And it seemed that they indoctrinate people in this way. Can you comment on that?
Where are you from, sir, and your first name?
I'm calling from Morgantown, West Virginia.
From West Virginia. What would be your comment? What is your name, please?
Dan.
Dan? Go ahead, Mrs. Prophet.
You don't have any materials from our church which indicate any seclusion. We encourage a complete participation in thought, in an investigation, in the American way of life. Our people are not cut off, and there's just no such
Well, where do we get these stories? Now, for example, here's what we read. There are rigid taboos on contact between the sexes. Men and women were forbidden to speak to one another for more than 10 minutes at a time, and couples who wanted to meet had to exchange letters through prophet. Is that true?
No, it is not true.
What about there were strict rules on sex, even for married couples, said an ex-member. Lovemaking was to last no more than half an hour, and we were to say decrees before and after.
These are not true, and they are simply distorted statements by people who do not feel that this religion was for them.
Dan, what have you, I'm not saying that Mrs. Prophet is wrong, but give us your input. What have you heard?
Well, the materials I received it was a magazine, I forgot the name of it, but Mark Prophet was prominently displayed on the cover, and it said things like, don't eat Ritz crackers, because Ritz crackers have the word sex embedded in them, and ice cubes have naked people in them. So it seemed to me that what they were advocating was not trusting anything American, or anything cultural for that matter.
Let me ask you, how would you hear about this in West Virginia?
Oh, I'm from New York originally, and my friend, who was a college buddy of mine, went out to California and fell in with this crowd.
All right, thanks, Dan. Some more questions. You're on the air for Mrs. Prophet. Go ahead, please. You're on the air, please.
Yes, my name's Leslie. I'm from Tucson.
Yes, Leslie.
And I have a question for Miss Prophet. I was approached by a cult member when I was about 12 years old, about 6 years ago. And it sort of scared me. Do you approach young people on the street out in public?
Good question. Do you proselyte people?
No, that's not one of our things that we do.
How do you get members?
Well, I don't even think we have members per se. We have people who study the teachings of the masters, which we publish, and we publish books. We publish a magazine, and by the way, that article was a review of Brian Wilson Keyes on subliminal seduction, and he was pointing out the implants in advertising. Nobody's forbidden to eat Ritz crackers, and nobody feels in any way cynical about America or products.
Okay, let me ask you, one of the most severe indictments of you is the fact that Randall King, your third husband, is suing the church for $16 million. Why is he doing that?
Well, as you know, our attorney has instructed us not to discuss the court cases.
All right, as you can imagine, Mrs. Prophet, you know, I'm a reporter here, and you are a guest in our home here. But if we don't ask these questions, if you can't be a little more forthcoming, it raises questions in people's minds. You know what I mean?
I understand
okay,
that.
In a general way, without characterizing the type of litigation, why would your third husband, who apparently loved you and you loved him, be suing you for $16 million by saying that your church is a scheme to bilk people out of money?
We have answered his allegations. We have denied all of them, and this is all I can say about the case.
All right. You're on the air, please, with Mrs. Prophet. What is your question?
Yes, I'd like to ask Elizabeth Clare Prophet a question.
Go ahead, sir. Your name and where you're from.
Yeah, my name is Phil. I'm from New York.
All right,
I
Phil.
was wondering if, have you ever heard the expression, when you pray, they say you're talking to God. When God talks to you, they say you're schizophrenic.
No, I haven't heard that expression.
Do you think you could be schizophrenic?
No, I don't think so.
Do you believe, for example, you're in contact with Jesus, Mrs. Prophet?
I think it's everyone's lawful right to be in contact with Jesus.
Have you ever heard from Jesus?
Yes, and I think many people have.
Can you tell us about a conversation with Jesus?
My communion and meditation with Jesus is like every Christian's. I walk and talk with Jesus. I pray to him. I love him. I ask for his guidance, and I believe he answers me.
But do you ever hear his voice back?
I feel that he is a part of my mind, my soul, and my being, and I do feel that he answers prayer.
So in other words, you think Jesus is circulating in you?
I believe that Jesus speaks to every one of his followers, not to me exclusively.
All right.
They seem to be simple psychotic symptoms.
Well, Phil, that's a judgment that you would have to make. When we come back, we're going to talk to our disciples and an expert on this very interesting church. We're talking to Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and more questions on American Talks Back after this timeout. All right, we're back. Welcome to Sha-Na-Na, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. Our two members of the Church Universal and Triumphant. On my far right is Susan E. Krister, a 38-year-old social worker, and on my left is E.G. Jean Vossler, who is 58 years old, an economic development consultant. All right, Susan, why did you join this church?
Well, Stanley, I joined the church because there were lots of answers. Answers that I was able then and that I was looking for to be able to pass on in my profession, having worked in the field of social work in New York and in Los Angeles for 12 years. And finding people in states of mind and in conditions and circumstances in their life that they couldn't understand and I couldn't explain to them, I found some answers here that really made sense.
We're all looking for answers, and we are. Tell us, for example, what was going on in your life and what answer Mrs. Prophet and her church was able to provide for you.
Well, believe it or not, and it may sound a little mundane, but what is life about was the bottom line. Where are we going in life? What is the purpose? What am I supposed to do? You know, I think that many people have this sense that they have a purpose, a real purpose, a distinct purpose in life, something that they are, you might even say, ordained to do.
Are you aware? I'm sorry, go ahead, Susan, I interrupted. Go ahead.
I felt that way, and I was very successful in the field of social work. I worked with drug addicts in New York for many years on the streets. I ran one of the largest women's clinics in Los Angeles, and I found that I wanted to know more.
Do you have a job outside of the church?
No, I don't. I work full-time.
All right. Are you aware of the fact that generally the history of these movements, Jean, is that if, God forbid, something happens to Mrs. Prophet, the movement usually ends? Did you know that?
Well, I don't think that's absolutely true, because when Jesus started his ministry some 2,000 years ago, he was quite successful.
So in other words, you see a comparison between Mrs. Prophet and Jesus?
Well, I would simply say it's a very high teaching. You have the great teachings of the East and West, and coming forth in a very progressive revelation.
All right. Tell us, where were you in the cosmos before you joined this group, and when you joined it?
Well, I was a former Lutheran minister for 17 years, was dean of the Lutheran Church in Hawaii, and was very much involved in social programs, working with community action, working as head of manpower programs up in Northern California, and searching because I got to the point where I could no longer accept some of the basic doctrines of the Lutheran Church. And I was searching for the answers in terms of the meaning to my life.
All right, can I ask you this question? Have you given this church your money?
I give this church my money like I give my previous church my money as a Lutheran minister. I give, basically I tithe, and just like every other church, Roman Catholic, Protestant churches, they're all supported by the gifts of the members.
How much money have you given to this church?
I would say basically I'm a tither, which means 10%. I think good Baptists usually give 10% too.
All right, and how many years have you been a member?
About 7 years.
All right, can I ask you, what would the tithing would be? You sound like you make a pretty good income. You're an economic development consultant. How much money have you given to the church?
Well, you know, if I could calculate, probably 10% of what I make, you know.
Oh, well, we asked the question, can I ask you what you make?
Well, you can, yeah.
All right, how much do you make and how much have you given?
Well, you can say I make about 28 to 30,000 a year.
All right. Susan, have you given money to the church?
Not a substantial amount.
All right. Hey, all right. In other words, the beef has been that many members are asked to give money, and if they do not give money and they do not give it promptly, then they go into reincarnation for 50,000 years. In other words, there's a lot of pressure brought to them. That's not true, Mrs. Prophet?
Stanley, it's absolutely not true. It's so far from the truth that really it's funny to us.
It's ridiculous.
All right, you're on the air with Mrs. Prophet and two of her disciples. What is your question, please?
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, this is Margaret.
Yes, Margaret. Where are you from?
Boston.
Yes, Margaret. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I'd like to know how Elizabeth Clare Prophet lives with her conscience when she can control young people to the extent that she does. I had a son. He could have been no more dedicated than anybody else. He was thoroughly and completely dedicated to her church, to the point of coming from the East Coast to California, spending every bit of penny, every amount of money he had in the world. And then he was rejected by them and sent away after he had worked with them for over a year.
And then what happened to your son?
He died. He died 4 years ago.
Do you see a relationship?
I'd like to know how she lives with her conscience, because I feel it was a rejection from her church that destroyed this young man.
Would you want to comment, Mrs. Prophet?
Well, I don't know what she is talking
Oh,
about.
of course, she doesn't care about anything.
I care very deeply about all of my members. I don't know who you are speaking of.
I can't hear her.
All right, who are you talking about? What was your son's first name?
Why do you need to know that?
Well, so we'll know what we're talking about if we can. Here's what we'll do. We'll take a commercial break, and then we'll come back. And then stay on the line, will you, ma'am? Stay on the line, and we'll talk about it with Mrs. Prophet. All right, Marge in Boston, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mrs. Prophet has raised a legitimate point. You have to be a little more specific, or otherwise it's unfair to her. Can you tell us your son's first name?
No.
All right. Can you give her enough information so she'll at least know what you're talking about?
Okay, he was a young man, and he was involved in her religion. He was recruited on the East Coast, and he became very involved. We had trunks full of records from her, books from her, every single penny he could get on hand he did. He borrowed from me to go out to the conference. He went out to the conference. He lived in the ashram. Is that what they called it? He was happy. He was dedicated. As far as he was concerned, he was going to make it his whole life. And there was no boy any more dedicated to her and her religion. And
Marge, did your son give money to this church?
he gave every bit of, not much. He had to pay money to go out to the ashram. I don't know what that was, $500. I loaned him. I gave to him and said if this was what he needed and wanted in his life, I wouldn't deny it to him.
So you're saying that
a lot of money to me at the time. It was a lot of money.
You're saying Mrs. Prophet rejected him, and as a result of that...
When he went out there and he lived there for a while and he talked out there, and there was some talk of sending him as a disciple, and then he couldn't get through to her. He couldn't get an appointment with her. And finally he was told that he should go back in the world and make his mark, and then get in touch with her again.
All right, Mrs. Prophet, would you like to comment?
I would like you to know that there is really no manipulation of people, that the basic tenet of our faith is free will.
It's all words.
We do not believe that people should be confined in ashrams or in centers, but that everyone has his place in realizing the truth that he has seen. I don't know who we're speaking of. I'm very sorry, and I grieve with you for the death of your son, but I can assure you that he received only love from our church.
All right, you're on. Thank you so much, Marge. You're on the air, please. What is your question? All right. Before we have a question now, we're going to go to Dr. and psychoanalyst Dr. Robert L. Moore. He is professor of psychology and religion at Chicago Theological Seminary. Dr. Moore, have you been hearing us?
I've been hearing you fine, Stan.
Did you do, I understand you did some research at this church, am I right?
Well, for about 5 years, when I was first researching minority religions, I did quite a lot of field studies of different groups, and I spent quite a lot of time discussing the religion and interviewing young people from this group all over the country.
What did you learn?
Well, at the time that I had initially gotten interested in studying these groups, I was treating a number of young people who were involved in these so-called cults or minority religions, and I had the attitude that they were very destructive and what we call pathogenic, and I wanted to see what was going on in these groups firsthand. And so what I did was to begin going out, seeing for myself, talking to young people, spending a lot of time with the members of the different groups. And I was really quite surprised at what I found.
Well, what does that mean? That means, look, is this church in your belief a force for good, or is it destructive?
I can't really make an assessment about, the overall impact of the church. I can say that many of the young people that I talked to found it playing a very important role in their lives, and a very meaningful role. One of the things we need to understand, Stanley, is how critical young adulthood is for young persons, how much of a difficult time it is. And religion plays a very important role, and a lot of the interest in these groups is a phenomenon of the transition from adolescence to young adulthood. And it's a very important kind of experience for young people, and they're very, very vulnerable during this time.
Well, that's my point. Let me just say this. We've seen in recent years Jonestown, which was San Francisco-based initially, ending in a Holocaust. We see the group in Oregon from this girl. We've seen it over and over. They seem to have very bad endings. And that's the reason Mrs. Prophet is here. I cannot prejudge you, but you see her in that context. Viewers are out there. We saw Marge talking about the death of her son and giving us the impression that somehow this organization is responsible for it. And I'm asking you as a doctor, if you had a son or a daughter, would you want them to be a part of this church?
Let me first respond to a couple of things you said, Stan. For one thing, you've got to realize that there are about 500 of these small groups in the country, and we've got to be we have a public responsibility here. We need to make sure the public gets fairly accurate information about what's actually going on in the country. In our book, The Cult Experience, we tried to dispel a lot of the hysteria and paranoia that's going on in the country now about these minority religious groups. And I think it's our responsibility to realize that while, as in many different religions, you have charlatans, you have people that exploit their power, we don't want to be encouraging religious bigotry in America at a time when religious pluralism is at a peak and growing.
I agree. So what you're saying, in other words, you give this organization a clean bill of health based upon your investigation?
Well, the time that I spent with a lot of these young people who are devotees of this group, I expected to find a lot of frank psychopathology, and I expected to find a lot of very damaging kinds of experiences to them in this group. However, I did not find that to be the case. In fact, most of the research that those of us who have some scientific interest in this topic has shown that most of these groups are in fact not that pathogenic for persons. In fact, young people often find themselves getting better after spending some time in a minority religious group.
Did you know this man, Mrs. Prophet?
No, I don't know him.
So that's a testimonial, isn't it?
It's very nice.
Stan, I want to beg to differ. I'm not making any testimonials except to what I have observed as a psychoanalyst.
Stay on the line, Doctor. Dr. Moore from Chicago and our two disciples of this organization, which is headed by Mrs. Prophet, and your questions after this timeout on America Talks Back. You're on the air. What is your question, please? Your question, please.
Oh, yes. My name is Randall from Los Angeles. And Elizabeth, if you always treat all your people fairly in their financial dealings, I was wondering why you had quite a few people blindfolded and made them sign documents that in which they pledged 50% of their income from investments.
Randall who?
Randall King.
And this man claims, is this Randall King on the phone?
Sounds like it.
All right, now this is this was your former wife?
Yes, it is.
So in other words, you and Mrs. Prophet were the leader of this church?
Yes, that's true.
All right. All right. Well, what are you charging, Randall?
I'm not charging. She was saying that she always deals with everybody very fairly, and they have the ability to make their own decisions, and as far as how much money they're going to give to the church, and so on and so forth. And there was a time years ago that she actually instructed people to sign documents blindfolded, in which one of those documents were pledges that they had to give 50% of their income from certain investments to the church.
Mrs. Prophet, would you want to comment?
This is one of his allegations which we deny, and I'm not at liberty to comment on it.
All right, without being too personal, we all know there are divorces in real life and in religious life. Why would your former husband be saying these things in your opinion?
I don't know. I just send him love and peace.
Randall?
Well, I have a question then, because there's quite a few things in the financial dealings that I could bring up, and maybe she'll want to deny everything, but I think a good way to really let the American public know what's going on is I'd like to see Elizabeth and myself go on live TV and take lie detector tests on some of these questions to really let the inside story of what happens in those board meetings and the way that church is controlled. Let the people know what's really going on.
Well, look, you're certainly on live television, and God will be the judge of who's telling the truth.
Absolutely.
What are you saying? Tell us, and we'll confront each charge. Give us some charges, and then Mrs. Prophet will confront them. Go ahead.
Well,
why should we... Actually, I got a response.
Go ahead, George, absolutely.
Randall, you've got a case in court, okay? You're going to have your day in court. You're going to have your opportunity. So why don't you cool it?
Well,
basically, as far as I can see, what you're trying to do is make your points over television. And basically, as far as I can see, you're going to be dealing with this matter in court. So what's your goal? Are you attempting to use this forum at this point?
Gene, these things don't have to do with the court case. These aren't things that I'm alleging in my court case that I was, misused or anything like that. These are things that when I was there, I was on the inside. I was a board member. I was the president of the church. I know how the financial dealings of the church go on.
Well, tell us about it. What was going on so we'll understand it? Tell us. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I take it, Elizabeth, that the Ascended Masters, their teachings teach you to be honest and to obey the laws of the land. Is that true?
You know that that's true, Randall.
Okay. Did Ascended Master Linello ever give a dictation through you suggesting that we take students' gold and silver without their permission, embezzling it out of the safe, to cover margin calls in yours and my personal commodity futures trading accounts?
The answer is negative, and I cannot rehearse this trial on camera.
Yeah, really. My feeling is what he's doing at this point is a disgruntled guy. He's got an axe to grind. He's got a suit in the court. And what is he trying to do at the present time? Use this as a public forum.
And also, Stanley, what is he trying?
What has nothing to do with my lawsuit. That has nothing to do with my lawsuit. Have you read my lawsuit? It has nothing to do whatsoever.
How much money are you asking for, Randall?
Excuse me?
How much money are you suing the church for?
$16 million plus.
And when did you leave this church?
In 1980.
And why did you leave it?
Good question.
Yeah, ask him that question.
Because I was totally an emotional wreck. I just couldn't deal with anything after the 10 years that I've been there.
Well, tell us what happened so we'll understand. Why did you leave?
because I couldn't handle anything that was going on. I couldn't handle the dichotomy of what
Why don't you level, Randall? Why did you leave?
Because I was an emotional wreck and I couldn't handle what was going on there at the church.
This is a matter in terms of he's not willing to be man enough to come up front. This is a matter for the court.
Well, can you tell us in a general way?
No, I won't, because it's a matter of the suit. But he knows why he left.
Well, can we know a little bit? Because
well, Randall, why don't you admit why you left? You know, you're bringing up the thing, you're making the stink. Why don't you admit why you left?
Because I was an emotional wreck. I was in a state of mind over the years that I couldn't deal. I was flipping out. I was yelling at people. I was getting mad at people. I just couldn't deal with it.
That's your history. I remember you.
Well, that is why I left. I finally got in a fight with Jim McCaffrey, and I left.
Randall, unfortunately, we do not have enough time. Perhaps we'll do another show and you'll be there. Thank you very much for calling in. You're on the air. What is your question for Mrs. Prophet and her two disciples? Go ahead, please, and also Dr. Moore. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to add a positive word to this whole thing. I'm Robert from Magura. Yes?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, let's put it this way. We have 10 children. 3 of them are in the church. I've been married 40 years to one lady, and it's kind of a straight situation. I mean, I'm not a kook. I'm not somebody off the wall. I was in the advertising business for 30 years, and I really think this is where I need to be. It's made me a better person. It helped me stop drinking beer. I stopped cigarettes when I went to Summit University, and I really feel like I'm a better person, and I think most of my friends and relatives feel the same way.
Tell me your first name.
I owe it all to the church.
Your first name?
Bob.
So in those, you belong to this church?
That is correct.
All right, and do you go to these retreats? Do you go to the church?
Yes, I do.
And what do you do there?
Well, we do a lot of things. We pray for the betterment of the planet. We pray for each other. We have healing services. We just try to do what's right.
Bob, can you see me on television now?
No, I can't see you, but I can hear you from a distance.
Oh, I'm sure you can hear me. I don't need a mic but an open window. Here's what I want to ask. You know, Mrs. Prophet, you did not... I sound like Joseph McCarthy, remember in the 50s when he said, I've got these communists here. All right, well, look, you'll shoot them down, Gene, if I'm wrong here. The Herald Examiner, which is the evening newspaper here, has done 6 stories. Can you see these on camera? One here. You can see it's Mrs. Prophet. Her Will Be Done, the official photo of Mrs. Clare Prophet, the Guru Ma of church unification. And these stories go on and on and on to talk about refuge from Armageddon. There's a big ranch up in Montana where apparently there are guns and bunkers in preparation from in case of a nuclear war or a breakdown in the social system. Here is a picture of you, and they give the very strong impression that you think you are the reincarnation of Jesus or the Virgin Mary.
That is not true, Stanley.
Well, that's what these stories say. And
Stanley, it doesn't say that.
It does say, no. It does say, these stories are...
It does not say that anywhere in those newspapers.
Look,
well, as a matter of fact, here's what it does say, Susan. In a 3-month investigation into Universal Church in Triumph and its finances, the Herald has learned church study groups in various cities provide cover for fundraising operation that targets wealthy persons, according to ex-members. Dozens of devotees, including elderly and mentally ill persons, they say, have been convinced to sell houses or businesses and give the money to your organization. It goes on and on and on.
Stanley, look.
Yes.
If I were to take these charges in this newspaper, which basically are unsubstantiated, no facts, it's a kind of investigative reporting that does a discredit to the media. If you were to take this basically by a handful of disgruntled members and you build up a case, it's like, you know, you expect ex-members, disgruntled, someone with lawsuits to be objective. That's like asking the Martin Luther to be objective about the Pope, or anyone, when you come right down to it, to be objective about something. Say you're a hostile ex-Catholic and you have a run-in with a priest and you don't like him, you don't like the church. What are you going to do? Particularly if you got an axe to grind. You're taking the case to court. You're grinding your own axe. That's what this is.
Be back with Gene and the psychiatrist after this time out along with Mrs. Prophet. You're on the air. What is your question, please?
Pardon?
You're on the air, please. Your question or your comment?
Yes, my name is Marge McCoy, and I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Gardner. I'd like to ask Elizabeth Clare Prophet what her long-range plans are for the Royal Teton Ranch.
Are you calling from Montana?
Yes, I am.
All right, to briefly recapitulate, you have apparently 30,000 acres of land there in western Montana. What are your plans for that area of the state?
Our plans are to use it for ranching, farming, a church headquarters, a place for our members to retreat, and not to overdevelop it.
All right, do you know anything different, ma'am, Marge?
Well, no, not really, but I would also like to ask her if she's going to move the Camelot headquarters from California to Gardner also.
Not at this time.
Let me ask you, what is the response up there? You know, the comparable thing would be those people moving to Oregon. Are the people in your portion of Montana concerned about this church moving there?
We're concerned of the impact of a lot of people moving to our area, yes.
Isn't it true that most people at first were upset about this church, but as it's gone on, most people now are happy to have them there?
I can only speak for myself, and I can't say that I'm overly exuberant about it.
All right.
I think some of the fear maybe has gone.
All right. Dr. Moore, how would you comment? The fear, I guess that's the main thing. Have we exacerbated the fear tonight in your way, or have we just raised some good points?
I think there's a danger of that, Stan. I think we have a responsibility to get people onto some good resources. Let me recommend another book that I think that the public should be aware of. It's a book by Anson Shoup and others entitled Strange Gods. And it gives a overview that, if taken together with our book, The Cult Experience, it gives the public some sense of the complexity of this phenomenon. These are hard times, and people are really hungry for security, to find something to grasp a hold of in insecure times.
But isn't that my point precisely? Because they're hard times, aren't we at an age of the irrationalism, where any bit of poppycock is up there, people are grabbing onto anything? In hard times, we need hard, fast, good information, don't we?
You know what this gentleman is saying
do need good information, and particularly in this area.
What this man is saying...
Wait a minute, Dr. Moore, go ahead.
Hold on just a second. What this man is saying, I think, is fairly objective from his viewpoint, from his standpoint. He's coming from a certain standpoint. What we're concerned about is, you know, the inflammatory kind of reporting. Like you mentioned Rajneesh's group, you don't mention by name, but this group is like that group. You mentioned Jonestown. It's the same kind of reporting that bugged me in the Herald Examiner. It's inflammatory, what this gentleman is saying. It's inflammatory, it's calculated to stir up religious bigotry and prejudice. When you get right down to it, that kind of thinking and that kind of a thought we don't need today. Look, 150 years ago we were hanging Mormons. Now, Mormons are well accepted. What makes the difference between a so-called and a sect?
You raise a fundamental question. When we get back, we're going to talk more with Mrs. Prophet. Thanks so much to Gene Vossler and to Susan Krister. Thank you so much for being on the show. More with Mrs. Prophet and with Dr. Moore after this timeout. All right, so you feel that history will vindicate you. In other words, that the purgatory or the problems you have now are comparable to what Gene said that the Mormons had in early days, and that history will record this as a bona fide religion?
Well, actually, I don't feel I have those problems, because in general, we get along with people. These voices are not many. We have thousands of very, very happy and fulfilled members with much fruit to testify to. We get along with our neighbors, and I'm not persecuted by the country. America is a place I love. I love our people. And I think we're doing a very positive work in our Montessori school in teaching the principles of the Masters of East and West. It's fulfilling a need. It's opening doors into a new age. It's taking religion forward. And I'm very satisfied.
Thank you so much for being on our show, Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And thanks to Dr. Moore in Chicago. And see you tomorrow on America Talks Back. And keep those phones coming. We love you, America. Along with Mrs. Prophet, we love this country, right?
Right.
This is our country. This is your show. This is your satellite. And I'm your man. See you tomorrow on America Talks Back.
Well, thank you, all you wonderful hearts. They said 3,500 phone calls came in the first 45 minutes, so I knew who was calling in. I said, why didn't you put him on the air, you know? I just talked to Edward, and he decided that all of those various people were pre-planned. And so, you know, they had him lined up. And Cheryl Owen happened to be where the people were who were putting on the show, watching it, and when they said, oh, we've got him on the phone now, referring to King, you know, so they did have it set up. But, you know, Stanley Siegel and all their producers promised me they would not discuss the court cases, because I told them I would refuse to discuss them, and finances and membership. And he said, we want to talk about you and your church and your teachings and so forth. And so they went ahead and discussed it, but I was very glad for the exposure. I was infinitely grateful for this defender. So I think it was a good experience. If I had it to do over, I would do it again. I don't really know how we came out. I hope we came out okay. You know, you always think about things you could have said better, or you should have said, and things like that. But they didn't ruffle us. So, do you have any comments?
I hope my father saw it, that's all.
Oh boy. You can never quite tell when you've been through a battle who won, you know. But I just...
His presentation was clear and intelligent.
Dr. Moore?
In spite of himself.
No, actually, I think he was trying to be an ally by not being too for us. That's the best kind of ally to have from a professional standpoint. Pardon?
Randall sounded insane. He was jabbering towards the end.
The feeling I had when Marge McCoy came on was definitely that it was a planned sort of thing. And so I expected, you know, to hear some, you know, the negative kind of things that we've been hearing from Gardner and Livingston. But she didn't really say the kind of things that I was expecting to hear her say. She was saying the kind of things that, you know, the fears that we had, you know, we don't have them. And I can only speak for myself, but I'm not overly joyed. You know, that to me was really a positive aspect, because it's saying that the people there are accepting us and enjoy, you know, want us to be there.
Well, what Edward says is she couldn't have possibly been calling in because there's no cable television in Gardner. She could not have been receiving us, and she could not have been seeing us.
Right, so it was definitely
So they
planned.
had it prearranged.
Right. And so I think that they were looking for something more negative that didn't happen.
Of course, he asked me to appear on the show with King, and I said I wasn't going to try the case on television, so he just put him on, you know, put him on the air. In fact, he told him, well, here you are on the air, go ahead, you know. You are right. Subtitles for were there subtitles for King?
No.
Subtitles for Marge McCoy.
So it was all planned.
Well, as Edward says, you never trust the media. We were ready for this. We were ready. I mean, I was definitely ready to meet those kind of questions if they came up. Could have met them better, but our attorneys, you know, absolutely forbade me to answer any questions except to deny claims and to let them know that we had filed answers to their allegations and that the court was not going to be tried. I mean, the worst mistake I could make is say anything negative about King on television. You see, and he is doing that. He's done it now another round, and that's really his problem. It's not my problem. I gotta come over here and see you. Come here.
The feeling I had was that you were just a calm in the eye of the hurricane, and all this was going around, and every time they flashed on you, they even flashed in your hands one time to try to see if you were nervous, and it was, they were just searching for some way to discredit.
My hands, what were they doing?
They had a close-up to try to see if you were nervous or something, and you were just totally at peace, and that was the feeling that I was getting from watching.
Isn't that amazing?
They kept trying to shake it, and from my heart, all I could see was that every time they tried to make it worse, it was more of a peace, and it was like just the eye that was calm in the middle of the hurricane, and that's kind of the feeling that was being portrayed. So I think that for a lot of people that it got to be a point that you could see was orchestrated to try to catch you at some slip. And every time they tried, it just got worse on them. And that guy himself was just so emotional, I couldn't believe it. Even at the end, I'm the man, you know? I mean,
what did you say?
Trust that guy to buy a used car?
Well, what he was telling me on the station breaks, he's saying, you know, it doesn't look good for you not to answer these questions. You know, he said, you should be answering these questions because you don't look good. And I explained to him that I told him ahead of time I wasn't going to answer those questions. But was it I that wasn't looking good or him that wasn't looking good?
He just told himself.
I hope so. I just like to think that some people who are looking for what we have will see the face and know it and look beyond the whole circus that was going on.
You did such a great job at always pulling the point back to the teachings. Yeah. You just kept turning them right around to, you know, everyone can find Christ within themselves. Yes, I talk to them like everyone else does. And it was really beautiful. Really beautiful.
Well, Mother, your compassion for the mother of the boy who died was the teaching. It was right there. It was Jesus. It was very nice to see. The woman took in a little bit of it. But I think the audience had to have seen that. You heard what was happening. And you responded from your heart.
Plus the fact, you know, why did she have anything to hide? Why wouldn't she tell us the name of her son?
I think it originally she said his name Robert. I believe she said that in the beginning. I believe she said her son Robert.
I don't think she did.
Maybe she wouldn't give it.
No, because nobody in the control room got it either. You can always tell how a great barometer of any show is how the stage crew responds and how the control room crew responds. And they were coming out at all the breaks. The first break they came out and we were not on yet, so they came out and they said, "She's terrific." That was the first comment. Then they went back in. Then they came back out and they said something to the effect of, he's not getting anything over on her or something like that. In other words, Stanley has finally met his match. And then we went on from that point. We couldn't hear the control room comments, but then when it was over, Gene and I came out, and Mother was still inside talking to Stanley and the producer. We went out to the hallway, and the control room poured out into the hallway. And they said, "Oh, that was a great show. That was a great show. Did you hear that?" That they were referring to Randall. And they said, they were saying how Randall basically slit his own throat right on the air, and that in fact the one of the girls that was in the control room said that at the point when Randall finally did his final response and saying he had been out of control and emotionally distraught and all this thing, that everybody in the control room looked at each other and went. You always wonder if you just had the response because your vision's a little focused in one way, but they all responded that way.
Mother, you never cease to amaze me how you bring in every facet of the teaching. You brought Saint Germain in, even when the question wasn't asked.
I sort of felt like people, like people were trying to zero in on you there, and I really liked the fact that Gene stepped in and acted like a protector, even though you don't need to be protected particularly.
Yes, I do need
and,
protection.
and like just like a defender of the woman, defender of the faith, and I don't know exactly how to put it into words, but I just liked that, and I felt like it was so neat because you don't really have to defend yourself. You don't have to do any of that stuff, and it just sort of it's just an end run sort of thing, and I liked it.
I just want to make one quick comment. It's, I think Susan and I both felt one of the greatest joys and privileges to be at Mother's side tonight. And I felt a real honor. I felt the support here. And it's just a great joy. Just a great joy in my heart. Thank you.
I want you to know that Jean and Susan both said that on the way home, but it was I who felt privileged to be on the show with them. Really, they're really terrific. I'm glad that, they said pick 2 people that are your rank and file members and bring them over. And I said, nothing doing, I'm bringing Jean and Susan. So I'm glad I did. So Cheryl, you were mentioning that you were behind the scenes hearing their comments. Did you want to tell people the comments?
Well, basically, it was the first, between the first commercial, Susan already, I don't know if I should reiterate, but the first comment was, that Mother was great, and then the second commercial, they would all come piling out, and then they all said, well, boy, she's not gonna let him get away with anything, was what the comment was. And then when they would go back, then Jean and Susan went back again, and then they would all talk around in here, and one of the comments was by a lady, and she said, well, how can Elizabeth subject herself to this? Why is she going on the air and putting herself through all of this? And I think the question was answered when they came back. They were answering their own questions, saying, boy, this Randall guy, he was really exposing himself, and I think what I wanted to say personally was, it was great to be able to have, I'm sure we've all been through it with the newspaper articles, but to have the truth on the other side, the carnal mind has a certain amount of justification, and when you hear these things, but to hear the actual truth on the other end, to me it was a conversion. It was worth seeing every newspaper article and going through the persecution, so to speak, as I'm sure we all did in our own way. But to me it was really great to see the truth brought forth. It was consoling in my own soul, and I'm sure that everybody that watched it had the other side also, in one way or another. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Why don't you also mention, although I quoted you, I'd like to say you to say in your own words why you thought that they had the King phone call set up.
Well, at first I didn't know it was King on the line. When they all came piling out of the control room, they said, he's on the line now. And somebody, I think, said, who? And they said, King. We've got King on the line, her ex-husband. And in my mind, I thought, I couldn't imagine that it was King, but I thought maybe it was a question about King to that sort. And so even when I was listening, I didn't realize that it was actually King on the line. And then I thought, wow, this is really Randall. And so I think overall he was really exposed himself, and they all laughed at him. Everybody in there that just laughed at his comments, and the Susan's comment about how he was a little bit loony. So I think overall he really exposed himself, and it really ended on a good note.
I can tell you something right now.
Okay, take the mic here.
I can totally confirm that they had everything set up, because I was there also trying to get a tape played, and I went back into one of their rooms to use their phone to call Camelot and make sure our cameras were here tonight. And they had the lady from the Chamber of Commerce name already typed up on the screen. And I was looking at that going, what is that doing there, you know? And I didn't connect it until all of a sudden I heard her on the line, which was 15 minutes later. And so, and then, you know, and after they see me looking at the character generator, you know, I quickly get ushered out the room and they say, oh, we better phone for you over here. So, and there's no question, it was totally set up.
I think that Truth has a piercing and a quick way about it. And it was the high point of the whole thing for me was the sincerity and the sweetness and the quickness when he said, well, who is in charge? And you said, God. It was so perfect. And that, it was that quick truth piercing ray with boom, boom. And it was that fast, and you were just kind of hit with it. And the whole time that you were on, you were just the center of the Buddha. It was like the attack was coming every direction, and of course you can't be moved because you're in truth. You know your truth, and you know that what we stand for. And I mean, what can you do? You know, and they don't know, and you know they don't know, and it's coming at you from every direction. And Mother just said, you were just so perfectly peaceful and smiled at the ridiculous comments here and there. I mean, just like, oh God, give me a break, you know. What can you do? So I think above and beyond all, like I said, the vibration of the Buddha and of truth was very, very present. And I think it was a victory overall.
Well, I can tell you something that it's going to take my chelas to tell me if I'm being persecuted, because I don't think I'm being persecuted. I just can't see it. I just, you know, I'm just there. And I just have to love all the people. You know, everybody was falling all over themselves to shake our hands and tell us we did a great job. You know, they stab you in the back and then they tell you you're great. You know, Stanley Siegel wants to hug me, and I didn't let him. It's like they expected us to get off the air and tell them off, and we were just as nice off the air as we were on. It's you know, it's really the whole reason why we don't get perturbed is because they're not real. I mean, these people are really not real. What they're saying is not real, and you know, it's just as nonsensical as this guy telling me I was psychotic or something because I pray to Jesus. He indicts the whole world of praying people. Go ahead. Whoever wants to take this mic, please do.
Mother, I think of all the victory that will come from this show and all the people that have watched it and whose hearts will be quickened. And it reminded me of the time when one of the first articles came out that was in criticizing you, and that was in the Hustler magazine. And afterwards, you remember that? And afterwards you told us, I know that there will be somebody that will come because of that article. And one day, sure enough, we were processing an application for Summit University, and here where it says, how did you find out about Church of Himself? I read it in Hustler magazine.
I've been frightened to get in front of this microphone. I've never done it before, but my heart's going to go out of my chest. I would like to witness to my understanding of the Lamb of God. I watched the Lamb on the altar, and the way that the fallen ones are judged, as we all did our judgment calls here, is you have to be that innocent lamb for them to knock against so that that judgment can come. And you continually just stay there on that altar, and they just keep pounding and pounding. But I remember when Satan was judged and when Lucifer was judged, the way it happened was they had to knock, and they had to knock against something. And I thank you for being that lamb.
Thank you. Praise God.
I just want to witness to you, Mother, and to Susan and Jean, the flame of truth and reality that is so strong through this broadcast, because words, and words, but never the word on television and radio and everything else. And even with a short amount of time and not a lot of ability to get into the specifics of the disciple or the Chila, or what it is that Jean and Susan found, actually, what they were looking for. In spite of all that, I'm sure that the people who were watching and listening felt the vibration of a peace and a truth and a reality that far transcends any particular thing that could have been spoken. And as others have already mentioned, the peace of your presence and the wonderful smile and the transcendent love that comes through those expressions on all of your faces could have said so much more than could have ever been said through words alone.
The world did hold its trial, didn't it? He became the orchestration of a mock trial.
And Jean's, when Randall King was spewing forth his over and over, and Jean just said something to the effect of, Randall, I know what you're like, or I know who you are, I've seen you,
Tell them why you left.
And when you looked at the camera, and the camera was right in your eyes, and you were looking out at all those people, there's such a bedrock, such a bedrock of defense and of truth that was justice. I mean, that was the proof right there of the whole thing.
And we just won our case, didn't we, Jean?
Yes.
Mother, I can only be grateful for this opportunity to thank you for standing for us, for speaking the truth for us, for being there, for the Chilas who want to be there to speak the word to the land. And I want to thank Jean for being the guard for us, for the Chilas who want to be the guard in response to Mother's own stand but are not able to be there, for holding that flame of victory and liberty in your hearts and in your heart, and speaking the word for us, articulating it in so many ways, in saying that one particular comment I want to make is that when you did sort of interrupt the psychoanalyst to make a very crucial statement that this is all inflammatory, and I think many people in the public are not able to put that or articulate that statement in their words, but they do realize it in their heart, and it was good for you to have said that it was inflammatory. I think this is just a send-off for you, Mother, for bringing the violet flame to the Philippines and to Australia and to Hawaii, and I think the vengeance of the fallen ones are just coming at you at this point when we are yet to come with the victories for this town.
Well, they do themselves in every time.
Yeah.
Every time they do it.
This will be perfect.
We got equal time. That's one thing. We got equal, not quite equal, because your voices didn't come over the phone.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to comment about. Our voices did not get to come over the phones, nor did we get to stand there with you, but I want to say how grateful I am, and for so many here, I'm sure that our representatives could stand there for us. I felt like I was there. When I saw Susan come out, I said, I'm on television. I said, I get to speak my voice, and I know so many of us are so grateful that these two individuals could be with you there, Mother, and that the three of you could speak for each one of us to the entire country.
They were splendid. They were just splendid. I was just marveling at how wonderful they were.
Well, they had 150,000 voices. All of our members and the heavenly hosts, and you could see the angels there in the entire with their red stools and their crazy background and the craziness of the whole place, and this guy who was, I can't even think of words to describe his...
Out to lunch, huh? Actually, it was quite cunning. They thought up, actually the program director and all of them working behind the scenes obviously arranged the whole thing, not just Stanley Seal.
Well, I hope that other people viewing could see the angels as we could see them, because the light was definitely there. I am grateful. Thank you so much for representing us.
I somehow don't think that they expected this kind of a fight, do you?
No.
Here comes the rock man. Rock. Come on, bring in your rock. Here comes the rock. Here comes the rock. Look at this rock. Get up here. Everybody to see you carrying this rock. Come on up, Candace.
Oh my goodness, look at that.
I hope it doesn't break apart. It's going to loosen the bottom.
Look at
well,
this.
Saint Germain called for a focus, physical focus of the violet flame. So we got one.
Is it 50 pounds? 38 pounds.
It's from Brazil. Anybody wants to know? It does look like a thumb, doesn't it? We call it Lanella's thumb. Lanella's thumb.
That's magnificent. Do I get one each time I go on television?
I do have a specimen from Poland.
You do, huh?
I'm trying to get a hold of it, if I can get it for you.
I should show them the one from India.
That's a nice one.
I'm not sure if it's where I left it. Got photographed today.
This is heavy.
Would you like to place it on the altar? You can place it.
It's disintegrating a little bit on the bottom.
Is it?
Yeah, so I don't want to get it dirty.
Maybe we want to fill it in and support it with something.
Get a base for it. I'll take it back to AV.
You could. It won't stand, huh?
Yeah, it will.
Oh, well, if you could leave it here tonight by Joseph.
That's one of the best ones I've ever seen.
How do people know which rock to cleave open? I've always wondered this about you. You just go around knocking rocks open.
Everybody asks me that. I think when they found these, a farmer was just plowing this field and they knocked up a rock and it had all this crystal in it. And then they found literally hundreds of miles of this tubes of crystals, amethyst crystals, under the ground. And it's just a volcanic activity that creates it when gases get trapped in the molten rock, and as they cool, the crystals form in the cavities.
I think Saint Germain wanted to be sure that an amethyst was common for the common people, so we made a lot of them for the lot of people that God made common.
Yeah. But it's a wonderful focus.
Beautiful. It's got that turquoise on the outside.
Yeah.
Is that a hint to what's on the inside?
Sometimes, yeah. That's an indication of iron, which gives amethyst its color.
I see.
Oxidized iron.
Well, we thank you for that precious gift of your heart.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, you were great. We were watching the program over at our house, and we were actually having a good time. We were just so magnificent that we said, "Oh, this guy is nothing." I was waiting. Frank's got a parrot, and the parrot says, "Hail Saint Germain." I was waiting for the parrot to go, "Hail Saint Germain." Blaze got the light. He said, one day, for 15 minutes, he just said, "Blaze, Blaze." Yeah, I said, "Hail and Ellen." I think he's going to ascend after this life.
See, he's got to get a threefold flame in order to ascend.
Yeah.
That means he has to make the transition from the animal to the human kingdom.
Yeah, he's well on his way. And he's got this other parrot. It's all white. We call him Serapis Bird. He's only 5 months old, so he acts like a little baby. But he says, "Hi, sweetie." He's cute. Well, that's off the subject. But I just like to say again that we were quite amazed at the light that was coming forth from both Mother Jean and Susan. It was a wonderful experience. And like everybody said, the first thing I heard when Randall was talking, he said, "This guy's insane," because his vibration was totally insane. So we knew the victory was there.
Well, as a matter of fact, he used to yell at me like that round the clock. You know, it was an endurance for a purpose. You know, I fulfilled the law of God, the law of karma, and the law of the hierarchy's assignment to me. But it was, finally in the end, it was getting me down a little bit.
I used to work for Randall, and I know what you mean. I didn't like to used to go to work because he used to yell so much.
Well, bless their hearts. We wish they would all come into the knowledge of the truth of God. It's just too bad.
But now we've got it.
Yeah, much better.
We have marvelous instruments. It was all of the chelas in all those periods and those days. The joy and the sweetness and the love and the endurance of the chelas was truly the support of that ordeal. That ordeal which, for reasons of the brotherhood, my office, the judgment, and so forth, was ordained for me to go through. And I could not have done it without you, and you, the wonderful, wonderful light bearers of this world. You know, Jesus said that to his disciples in the last hours, he said, "You have endured with me through my temptations." And as a result of that, he said that he would make them to judge the tribes of Israel and to judge the fallen angels. And he gave that assignment to the 12 apostles at the Last Supper. This is the conversation they were having. And there's evidence of this in the Bible. But he expressed his love to those not who had endured with him in persecution or in anything, but through his temptations, which shows by that very careful selection of the word that Jesus saw everything he had to face as his proving the God victory that is possible, the Christ victory that is possible in the face of everything he went through. And where would we be without our great example that he showed us? And he showed us that it was, in fact, in that statement, his disciples enduring with him that enabled him to demonstrate the path of initiation under Lord Maitreya. You know, Mark is very careful in a message that he is delivering to the world in a forthcoming volume. He is extremely careful in saying that we are not saved because Jesus died on the cross, that a good father would not require his son who had done nothing to die on a cross so that evildoers could be saved. It doesn't follow justice. That wasn't the reason. Well, I put before you the corollary now to Mark's teaching, that the real reason that Jesus made a public display of what he went through is to demonstrate that he had a guru who sent him, that he was obedient to that guru unto the fulfillment of that word, that he suffered and endured all things, and he took everything that came in the world as something sent to him, an opportunity to show and expose the fallen ones and to show all who would come after him, especially us, what kind of snakes they are, and the fact that it is possible to go through them and transcend them and vanquish them and to have the victory over death and hell. So Jesus did not go through the crucifixion to die for our sins. He went through the crucifixion to show that he and all of us can survive anything that they try to do to us. And that the resurrection is what follows. So if that is true, we are resurrected and we are all about to march around this planet with our victory message. And I'm very grateful that as your support has been so wonderful that I could witness to you, because that's what I felt I was doing. I was witnessing to the faith you have in me, that yes, it is possible to go before the world. And I will do it when called by God to do so. And I was just as happy sitting there as I am standing here. I mean, I am nowhere but in the presence of God. You are nowhere but in the presence of God. And, you know, I don't think I did that great. I think I was okay. Next time I promise to do better. I've got to get warmed up for these bouts. But I do want to tell you that God is great. And that's who was great on the show. God is great. And I think that innocence is always the greatest protection, because I honestly had to be told that that was a setup. I mean, I walked out of there not even thinking. I wasn't thinking about a setup, because I don't think in terms of conspiracy. I was just thinking about God and beloved Saint Germain. And I'm so glad I could witness to him. So glad I could witness to him.